An escaped orc prisoner and a mind-reading pigman walk into a dungeon. What sounds like the setup to a rather eclectic and somewhat obscure joke is the reality in which Torga, the orc prisoner, formerly at least, finds herself in, having spent a few hours now in the company of Arsi the Upean, a pigman whose face is half rotted away due to a curse, digging using mostly their hands to pull away blocks of masonry in the cellar of an old abandoned tower in the old town of Port Deepwater. And while the Upean pitched this to Torga as simply wanting to expand his living space down there, I think it's fair to say that she caught on eventually that this is a more directed effort and that the Upean has some plans and is digging towards something. Now we just need to figure out what that is, because right now I have no idea. Hello friends, Anderson here. Welcome back to Knave, episode 6. We have reached the point where we can do our first dungeon crawl. Admittedly set this up somewhat in a shoehorn direction because I wanted to do a dungeon crawl, so when the opportunity presented itself and having Arsi as a kind of a friendly helper here, giving us the impetus to do so, we pounced, and now we have discovered that down underneath this ruined tower in this old town of Port Deepwater, there is a, well, likely connection point to get into a tunnel system that is under the old town and reaches somewhere farther, maybe even connects to the sewers of the new town. Maybe it goes down several layers. Basically, your hidden tunnels under your pick of the moment fantasy larger city. What is the Upean hoping to accomplish in there? Well, we assume, at least for the moment, that it is directly or indirectly related to the curse that he's suffering from. We don't know how the curse was acquired. We don't really know what happened there, but we, working as we do through dice and random results, we will reverse engineer this, of course. We will shoot the arrow in the tree and paint the circles around and call it a bullseye. Now, we need a tool for this. We need some kind of a mission statement, and I think without having referred to it previously, I would imagine that there are some evil curse or being put under a spell adventure hooks in the tome of adventure design. I'd be very surprised if there weren't. So that's my first port of call. If that doesn't deliver, we have a relative plethora of other random tables that we can sift through and we'll eventually find a curse. But for now, let's just go to the Tome of Adventure Design and see if there is a table or a set of tables to roll on that can create a sort of a driving force for our dungeon exploration here. And that exploration will be conducted using mostly the campaign notebook by Perplexing Ruins. So let's have a look. After giving this a somewhat thorough look, that doesn't rule out that I overlooked something. The thing I'm looking for is not really in here, and what I am specifically looking for is the way in which to remove that curse and potentially how that curse came about. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take it one abstraction level higher, and I'm going to go for the Lonely Knave action subject how oracle here, because we're just gonna ask the open question, in what way is this curse to be broken? That gives us a die 8, a die 6, and a die 20 to roll, and then we have some determining factors. 7-1, that is return tension boldly. Return tension boldly. Is the curse the result of Arsi failing to safeguard a relic of the Upean culture or religion? So what I'm envisioning now with the return boldly is that his charge is to, against the odds, return something, and that something is the thing that causes tension. So if we imagine, let's say, the Port Deepwaterians having gone into the Upayan homeland and there somehow duped or in a duplicitous manner acquired a sacred relic that also happens to be composed of rather valuable materials. So the Port Deepwater expedition wasn't particularly keen on the religious aspect of this. They just cared about the monetary value. And the Upayans, maybe in a matter of this quote-unquote barbarian civilization coming into contact with this deepwater merchant culture, this culture that is looking to put one over their trading partner all the time, were taken advantage of, and they somehow lost this relic. And Arsi, as a shaman, as a safekeeper of the sacred relic, started to decompose and fall apart. And now he went on a quest to find the origin of these strange people. He's already been through a lot, but he's finally arrived at Port Deepwater, and maybe now he's trying to get into the place where this is kept. And we don't really know how, but maybe his mind-reading powers played a part in this. He figured out, piecing together from random thoughts or maybe even some targeted questioning and then reading the minds inadvertently of his conversation partner, that there is an access point to this merchant family home I'm starting to get from this, where we have like a merchant family palace, and there the treasure vault is inaccessible just through random means of a heist, but that RC has determined through his mind-reading powers that the guards are worried that the only way to really get in there is, since it's subterranean, to get in through the old tunnel system that runs behind this underground vault where they're keeping the relic. And so he's found an access point to this underground system and is trying to find his way to a wall that he can tunnel through to get into this chamber where the salvation lies. As soon as he gets that back and brings it back to his people, he stops falling apart. It's a punishment from his gods, not anything that anyone else laid on him that I initially kind of had as an idea for this curse, but this is what happened. And none of this he will really freely share with Torga, who is just kind of earning her keep and getting a bit of food and water from this pig man. And while she's now figured out what they're doing, that they're trying to dig into somewhere, she also doesn't particularly care. In fact, she's almost welcoming this opportunity to stay underground with something of purpose to do and maybe win an ally in the process. And yeah, that's where we rejoin them, I think, where the long hours of labor eventually pay off and a block is removed and some fetid, stale air comes out from an opening that's now created. Instead of finding yet more rubble, there is a breakthrough. And the suspicion that Torga had that this is supposed to go somewhere is confirmed. And even though she doesn't need any further confirmation, the reaction that Arsi shows as she removes that block and that blast of unpleasantness comes out is rather telling too, as the pigman rushes forward and stares into the hole and starts clawing at it and making it wider and grunting at her.
Yes, this is it. Open it wider. Quick.
And Torga, instead of complying, takes a step back and looks him up and down rather amusedly.
You certainly need a lot of room for yourself, pigman. If I didn't know any better, I'd assume you were lying.
And having now gotten what he wants, RC just hand waves this away and explains himself as much as he dares.
Well, yes, but there's something of worth down there. Something of worth not only for me, but for you. So if you keep helping me, we will both come out ahead in this.
Sounds like a story I've heard many times before, and where the likelihood is more that we both come out dead in this.
And without really stopping to consider it and just ripping further boulders out of the wall opening, RC just scoffs.
By all means, go and head out into the city where eyes are upon you the second you step out into a crowded place, and you will be locked back up right quick again.
We do remember he can read minds, and he has sussed out what is on the forefront of Torga's worry bone at the moment. And she doesn't really... Well, does she suspect now that he knows a bit more about her than he lets on just through connecting the dots of what he's exposed so far? Let's make this a disadvantaged wisdom check. So we have to beat a 15 twice with a die 20 roll plus 1. This is very unlikely, but let's see. That is not a success. So Torga is just taken aback, but she also is somewhat overtired and not really used to having this kind of company maybe for a while, having been locked up and taken away by the bounty hunter. So she feels like maybe I said something, maybe I let something slip, and he does have a point. So she just nods her assent.
Well, aren't you as sharp as your face is ugly, pigman? But you're not wrong. It's a way forward at least. So let's head on in.
And let's head on in we shall. Since I do envision this to be somewhat of a larger underground complex, I do feel like we should do this. Wait, hang on, where's my... okay, there it is. Quickly liberate this from the backpack that I use for my physical group sessions, because I also need it there. Anyway, the graph paper notwithstanding, this is merely for a layout overview. We're going to take the set elements of the campaign notebook here. So we're gonna give us the rooms, the individual layout here, just to get a reference point of what we're dealing with, and we're using the random table to generate some of the contents. But what I don't really want to do is to go room by room by room by room, because I see this underground complex as a more vast space of old sewage systems, old cellars, buried buildings where the city has been constructed on the ruins of the previous settlement here, or just simply grown on top of itself over the years. So I'm handling this more like a point crawl, really, where we have a room and then we push forward and we assume nothing happens in the meantime as we pass through a bunch of corridors that we don't really need to map, and then we generate the next room, and that's potentially where something happens again, and then we go through a further set of corridors. Basically not to map out the entire structure here, because this would take forever. We just pick a starting point and go bit by bit by bit. And I think whether or not we find the access point just really depends on the type of room and what's in that room that we roll up. And maybe we can, if it takes too long, include some kind of an element of chance where we just say, okay, every room that they go through, they now have a X amount chance, and that grows by every room by +1 or something like that. We don't need to make it overly complicated. I just want to get into a dungeon. So let's take some differently colored 8-sided dice, and we go black is down and blue is across, and see what kind of a room we end up with. 3 down, 2 across, that is the entrance sort of tunnel, I guess, that we find here. It immediately has 2 exits that we can take. So this is the entrance where we tunnel in a little bit down, and we end up copying that wrong, so there's another opening here. Anyway, we end up with 2 possibilities to walk through. Now, doesn't really matter, we just know that there is an option to loop back here in a different way. That might be helpful information. And I think we'll just roll the dungeon die on this table here to see if we have anything to discover, or some kind of encounter already. 3, we have a discovery. So we have a discovery table here. We roll another die 8, switch to the fancy ones. 6, we discover a clue. Okay, so we immediately kind of pick up on, oh, we're in a space that might already tell us a story of which direction is the right one to go. So chalk that up as one progress, finding a clue. That's good. We just assume that maybe we can reference this later. Maybe this can be a bonus to our DC on beating the dungeon or whatever. Well, I'll just track the progress here as a kind of an abstract checkboxes, and we'll see if we can figure out a system around it, or if we just end up with a room at some point that just tells us, oh, this is clearly the target. We'll see. For now, the point is to go from room to room and have a dungeon crawl here. So what clue is it? 2. It's a note. Okay, maybe we can contextualize this a bit and make sure we understand what kind of a room this is. That's an old kitchen. Okay, so this used to be a kitchen, well, connected to this guard tower here. It's part food preparation area, part old storage. We find some debris of old furniture that's table missing 2 legs, just kind of forming a strange sort of ramp jutting from the floor, buried in all sorts of junk that has just accumulated down here over the years, and we assume that occasionally also the water rises, so this is all very much messed up, but it's still identifiable as a former kitchen area. And we find a note that RC swipes up and looks at, stuck in the debris, lying on top of a pile, but somewhat safely buried by some fallen old junk, and he gently takes it out and unfolds it, looks over it. Can he read this? 19. Yes, okay, so he's picked up the written language, probably as part of his research into the Port Deepwater people and how to get a hold back of his relic. Maybe he's been at it for a few years. And the note simply says,
keep northern door locked at all times. Grain stores of merchant quarter. Bring out the rats, even all the way here.
And so from this somewhat frustrated note of a cook or helping hand of this former guard tower or whatever it was, we learn that we have to go in the northerly direction, because that is where the merchant quarter is, even though it's far away, but it attracts rats who then range far and wide, and they come through from that direction. So we have identified our first clue, and now we enter into the tunnel system properly. And as Torga and RC wander, Torga having lamp oil but no lamp, presumably RC is prepared, I would guess so. So does RC have some dungeon exploration gear? We'll consider this a roll with advantage. That's a high 18, yes. Okay, RC is prepared, so RC has brought forth the lamps, and Torga maybe has some spare oil in case it's needed. I think we'll just sort of wander into the next one, really. That's 5 down, 1. Okay, so we arrive at some doors. So we'll find some maybe former parts of a collapsed cellar that is now connected to this underground system. We assume that there is some level changes involved as Torga and RC make their way through here. And we'll roll the dungeon die again to see what awaits us here. That is another discovery. And the discovery is a 7. Treasure. Okay. This must have something to do with the doors. I can't imagine the treasure just lying there. So there are 2 questions that I would immediately ask, and I find both of them likely. The first is, are the doors locked? 20, yes. And, well, that answers my second question that I don't even need to roll for then. Yes, they're locked and they're trapped. Locked doors and traps. So what kind of treasure are we talking here? 5. There's a potion in one of the rooms behind these doors. And what kind of trap are we talking? 7. There's a tripwire. Maybe that's on the other side then? So if the door is opened without releasing some kind of safety latch on this side, it triggers like a mace to the face kind of swinging mechanism, we assume. So let's see if our intrepid heroes here find any of this out. And also, I don't think we need necessarily the nature of this room. This is just a tunnel, a part of an old cellar. So we have Arcee and Torga pull up 2 doors that are closed, seemingly locked, and thus an obstacle, but also somewhat enticing. I think this is another wisdom one on Torga's part, just to get a sense of how does she feel about this. Does she suspect the presence of traps? Does she tread carefully? How's her perception and intuition doing? That's a 19, so she is actually being careful for once. And as she looks at the doors and kind of weighs the axe in her hand and ponders simply knocking the doors down with full force, she lowers the axe and cocks her head to the side.
Still closed after who knows how long of a time. Must be reason for that.
You have a point, Orc. We should be careful.
So mechanical tinkering and stuff is an intelligent-based thing and not a dexterity-based thing. So Torga is fairly smart. So I'm gonna see if she can figure something out with regards to those locked doors. If she can finagle a way to get them open with like an improvised tool or something. I'll do this with disadvantage because we don't have lockpicks, but we assume that there is a way to make something happen with like a bent piece of metal picked up from the ground or something like that. Okay, that's a 20, but that doesn't count because it's also a 12, which is yes, but. Yes, but. Well, do both of these doors lead into the same room? 2. No. So, yes, but she opens the door that doesn't lead towards the treasure. And since we want to have a chance to get a shot at that potion, whatever it may be, we may just make this next room a dead end. But we'll figure out what kind of a room it is. 4. It's a storeroom. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So this is an old storage room from leftovers of an old cellar, and it's probably completely useless in terms of contents. We make that likely, so is there anything useful in there? We'll roll that with disadvantage. Oh, but there is. Okay, so let me roll on items here. Tools. There's some tools in there that are still useful. Let's see, how fine-grained are we for tools here? Relatively. So we have hammer, tongs, shovels, all kinds of stuff. Let's just say we have a hammer here that goes in nicely with our spikes as well. So Torga finds a hammer and they turn to the next door and we are going to improvise our lockpicking attempt again. What are these rolls again? Like, Jesus, this is, okay. So she gets this door open, and since she already suspected the existence of a trap, we have a chance to maybe dodge out of the way before it hits us in the face and don't automatically take damage. So that's a simple dexterity check. And as the spiked ball comes whooshing down, Torga pulls her head out of the way, almost makes the mistake of lifting it up again as it returns, thinks better of it, and just pulls back and waits until this implement of death and destruction has lost its momentum and just hangs there. I think we can just assume that this is a room that has some crumbling stairs that are blocked towards the up, but there is a functioning set of stairs to the down. So we have a level change here, just to mix it up a little and let them go a bit deeper. And in passing, we have Torga scanning the debris and the old staircase and seeing a crack in the wall, sort of a little nook where a stone is missing, maybe once hidden as a secret compartment, but now open. And there is a little flask in there. Let's give the Tome of Adventure Design its time in the sun now when we figure out what this potion is. But first of all, we want to know, is this a beneficial or a detrimental effect? So is it potion or poison? Putting it in a yes or no question, does this liquid have a positive effect? 11. Shake-up. Oh. Why? What? A shake-up should make the question I asked out of date. So presumably Torga approaches this nook and reaches out, takes this flask out, and in an effort to find out whether it's a positive or negative effect, uncorks it and finds out that it's not really functioning as an imbibe potion poison at all, but that by uncorking it, it already does something, and maybe that's kind of akin to a magical effect. I was actually trying to use the alchemy section of the Tome Adventure Design to determine this, but maybe now we can instead use it to determine the magical effect. I think I'll use this Magic Area Tricks master table here to build on and see what general direction now takes effect without even having to drink this potion. 14. Confers a curse effect if players take wrong action, and beneficial magical conduction if players take correct action. See table 318 for conditions and curses. So the reaction to this now seems to be somewhat important. So first of all, we roll a die 6 to see what its effect is. Is it an effect to the area, to an item, or to an individual? 5. It affects the individuals. Okay, so it will affect Torga and Arcee. And now what is the correct response here? So what determines whether this is beneficial or not? We have a D100 table here. 41. Move the thing from one place to another. It might or might not be significant where it's moved to. Okay, at the simplest level, this is, I think, a impulse decision for Torga with this item in her hand, whether she drops it and retreats from it or throws it away from her. And whether or not she is figuring that one out is a matter of intuition, so we roll her wisdom check. 17! She throws it away, incurring thereby a potentially beneficial effect for herself and maybe Arcee. So what is this effect now? Beneficial conditions and curses to individuals we have here. That's another percentage roll. 33. Character gains treasure, magic item. Okay, so something manifests out of this oily mist rising from the object. We assume that this manifestation is the reason why it would have been dangerous to hold on to this, as Torga throws this away, seeing the first waft of blackness coming out from this flask, throws it in a corner, sort of onto the ascending remains of the stairs, where it crashes. It coalesces into a mass of wavering darkness that then inhales itself to like a focal point, like into just a perfectly round shape, and pulses, explodes almost, but in a very contained fashion, knocking about everything that was in its immediate area, but leaving Torga and RC unharmed, unlike they would have been if she had stood right next to this and simply taken a few steps back and dropped it, which would have caused this immediately. And as things settle down again, there is an item there. There is a magic item there. Okay. We have tables for this in the campaign notebook, so let's make use. And we determine the type with a D88 again. So black goes first. 74. It's a pair of gloves. And what do they do? 23. Permanently gain a new spell each time cast. Take the 8 damage. Oh god. Okay. Those are some nasty gloves. What is this spell? I think we'll just reference the Die 100 spell list in here. So 90. Summon idle a carved stone statue the size of a 4-poster bed rises from the ground. Is that it? Or is the idol something we can interact with? Would be interesting to have like almost like a warlock patron of sorts, where every time you put on the glove and make a certain gesture, you maybe like this, you raise a stone statue from the ground, but it also drains you. Does it have any kind of further point, this statue, or is it just the ability to summon a statue? 20. Yes, and yes, it has a point. And and as soon as we use it for the first time, it'll consider us as being in its service. Like, we don't even get a choice or anything. So we find the gloves of... I think this is where we bring out the dragon names, because they are suitably imposing. So not that it means that this is necessarily a dragon, but this is something that needs an imposing name. So we roll our percentage result and figure out what this is called. 99. BRIMGORE, the keeper of the red flower. Okay, gloves of BRIMGORE summoning, and we know now that there is something out there called BRIMGORE, the keeper of the red flower. So, pair of gloves, pair of magical gloves. RC is paranoid. Torga isn't particularly wise, but RC is also curious. He's not going to intervene, torn between two loyalties, as Torga makes a wisdom check to figure out whether she wants to wiggle her fingers a bit with these new gloves. She succeeds, so she has it in her control that she, as soon as she does this movement, that tingle tells her, okay, I'm about to do something here, and that surge of power, and maybe this isn't the moment, so she doesn't continue with her summoning and takes those gloves off and sticks them in her pocket for later determination, which elicits a frustrated grunt from RC, who doesn't know what to think, whether he's pleased about this or not. But now Torga has these gloves. So writing down here, summon statue of BRIMGORE, the keeper of the red flower, but take die 8 damage each time. It is done. And done we are too. So on that note, I thank you very much for watching. I catch you next time, and bye for now.